A very warm good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, viewers. I'm Matthias Aufiku, news editor of the Namibian Sun newspaper. Welcome to another exciting edition of the Evening Review Show. Well, tonight in studio, we're joined by the Chief Executive Officer of the Environmental Investment Fund, Mr. Benedict Libanda. Good evening and welcome, sir.
Good evening and thanks for having me.
No, it's indeed a pleasure to have you here. It's your first time on the show, I believe.
Indeed, it's my first time.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I think we're all guilty for taking so long to get you onto the platform. Yeah, I think first and foremost, happy birthday to the fund. You guys turned 11 yesterday. I mean, it must have been a rough 11 years. Can you maybe just take us briefly through the journey from February 13, 2012 to date? How has it been? What has your role been like?
Yes, indeed, it has been a challenging but exciting and fulfilling journey. And it has been a privilege that I've been heading this organization for 11 years now, since inception. Actually, it was the entity was first, launched in I think 2012, 13 February, by the former president, His Excellency President Ifekepunye Pohamba. And now we've been in operation for 11 years.
Yes.
But there's a very good history towards this entity. Maybe I want to touch on that one because very few Namibians knows how the EIF was established. Now that background is extremely important to touch on. Maybe with your permission, I'd love to touch on that one.
No, go ahead, sure.
Okay. At independence, after almost it was 28 years of exile, our founding president, upon his return from exile, he barely recognized his home states, in the north, that is in the Umsat region. This is because there was a lot of degradation that has taken over the landscape and ecosystem. So during the development and crafting of the constitution, it was found needed that sustainable development, biodiversity, conservation, and the wise utilization of natural resources is entrenched, in the constitution, and that was the foundation of Article 95, that really provides enshrinement of ecological and sustainable utilization of natural resources. And the idea thereof was to establish a fund that will amplify and cover environmental debt that was left behind by the former regime.
Yeah.
So in 1992, the founding president presented the Green Plan of Namibia at the Rio summit that was held in Brazil. So it was the first green environmental plan in the world to be presented at the summit. Then in NDP 1, NDP 2, there was objectives and outcomes to establish such a fund. Then in 2001, it was eventually passed through an act of parliament. But between 2001 and 2012, there was no funds to capitalize the entity because there were a lot of competing development priorities, from HIV/AIDS investments, development, water provision, etc. So it was adequately capitalized in 2011. That's when 2012 is our operational date, and I just wanted to explain that.
Yeah, okay. Well, you're mainly into green financing. Many people will be wondering, what is this green financing, and where do these resources come from?
Yes, our mandate is to mobilize, financial resources and capital, both from national avenues and also international partners. So in mobilizing those resources, we allocate investments and deployment towards natural resource utilization, towards environmental sustainability projects, towards generally investments that promotes environmental sustainabilities, and of late we added on climate change adaptation and mitigation. So what we're doing is that we realize as a country that there is a resource scarcity in the country. Water is not infinity, for example. Namibia is a dry country. Arable land is less than 10%, and hence by virtue of that, we need to safeguard our environment and to put in place sustainable principles and measures so that the future generation also enjoy the beauty that we have at the moment. So, and that is extremely important. Hence, we are saying everything that we finance should add value into ecosystem maintenance or ecosystem enhancements, should add value towards environmental sustainabilities, as well as livelihood, as well as economic development. So we have to balance the three pillars of sustainable development: environmental, social development, and economic development.
So with the climate change phenomena, especially in recent years, that has become so intense, how is the fund keeping up with that, as far as sustaining those three pillars that you just mentioned is concerned?
Yes, as much as climate change has a huge impact on Namibian development as a country in all sectors, be it in agriculture, mining, fisheries, tertiary institution, financing institution, etc. What we've done at the ERF is to analyze the impacts that arise from climate change, and then use those challenges as opportunities to find innovative solutions, raise capital, and introduce those interventions to address climate change. Luckily enough, there's also a global movement towards addressing climate change. So there's a lot of funding avenues or windows that could be accessed by countries to help individual countries that are mostly affected to access funding through grants or concessional capital and invest that into climate change adaptation or mitigation. And we've done well at that because, if I recall very well, in 2015, we applied for accreditation with the Green Climate Fund. In 2016, we finally accredited in July. We were the 19th entity to be accredited by the Green Climate Fund. And since then, we are able to access more than $700 million Namibian in grant funding, mainly to support vulnerable groups, such as small-scale farmers and those ones who are most reliant on ecosystem utilizations, to improve livelihoods and also to improve and enhance resilience, and that will enable them to cope with the impacts of climate change.
I'm pretty sure the type of project that the EIF would ordinarily fund must be very technically based. So, as Matthias living in a village in Kwez or somewhere there, what mechanisms are there to ensure that once funding is extended, there's also technical support that follows that funding?
Yes, you are quite right. Once we access this funding, we need to conform to the requirements of donors, that we come up with indicators and report measures that demonstrate climate change impacts being addressed. So unfortunately, most of our communities, civil society entities, especially CBOs for that matter, don't have the technical expertise and capacity to interpret climate change into action. So what we do as ERF is that we do match finding. So if a community wants to do a complicated, water conservation project, using renewable energy technologies, for example, we'll go on a market and find out, and search for for technical partners who are vested, in terms of providing that services, and we match them with communities. So we've been doing that for over, I think, more than 200 projects for now, where communities are supported by technical partners, and those technical partners are more from the private sectors. And then in the process, cross-pollination of skills and capacity is transferred from the private sector's specialized entity to the beneficiating communities. I'm talking about post intervention, where communities will be able to manage and operate machines, will be able to maintain those technologies that we're introducing, whether it's solar water pumping systems or hydroponic systems that we're introducing, whether it's resilient livestock support that we're introducing in the country, in their specific areas. Those needs to be sustained after the intervention. So a lot of capacity building is attached to every project that we implement.
Yeah. So would you then say, going forward, and especially when considering the sustainable development goals, especially those ones related to the environment and climate change, to be specific, would you say the fund needs perhaps certain modification going forward? I mean, things are changing since inception. What do you think are some of the avenues you should look at just to adapt to the modern world?
Yes, look, the scale of investment required to address climate change in Namibia is huge. By 2030, we need about 70 billion Namibian dollars, both mitigation and adaptation. And if you look at the gap to adequately address that, it's so huge. These figures have been produced by the Ministry of Environment and Tourism, Forest and Tourism. There's a global matrix that is followed in terms of identifying those figures. So to be specific, they're in the nationally determined contribution, the NDCs, so it comes up with a figure. But if you look at the climate funding that is flowing in the country and the investments that is been allocated through budget provisions, it's too short. It still falls short of what is required in terms of meeting our obligations to sustain the Namibian economy, to sufficiently address the impacts of climate change. And this is where now AIF and other entities comes in. It's like, what can we do differently so that we attract funding at bigger scale? We need to scale up such funding. This calls for strategic partnership with the private sector, with development, agencies such as the UNDP and UN Family at large, the multilateral environmental and climate funds such as the Adaptation Fund, the Green Climate Fund, international development finance agencies such as the French Development Agencies, DBSA, and the African Development Bank. So the EIF has established relationship with those entities. And each entities, they bring in different strengths to the table. Some, they bring in credit lines for the commercial part, like renewable energy investments, sustainable tourism, as well as agriculture. And we work with private sector, such as banks, to execute those mandates. So that is commercially driven investments. Then we go for resilience and adaptation, which is mainly donor funded. That is working with different concessional providers of grant capital. So to date, we've been able to raise more than 3 billion Namibian dollars in terms of climate change intervention, and we've deployed almost 90% of that, to intended beneficiaries, reaching more than 230,000 beneficiaries, mainly small-scale farmers and vulnerable communities residing in areas such as conservancies, community forests, etc.
So in terms of interest from the part of the public, how is that been, and what model does the fund use? Do you perhaps send out calls for interest to fund certain projects, or can I walk into your offices and say, this is the idea our community has, can you come on board, or how does it work?
Yes, it's quite a complicated process, and each fund is approach the solicitation of projects differently. For example, most funds that we deploy is through call for proposals.
Yeah.
So we'll go on the market, advertise a call for proposal. Then we receive the proposals from different beneficiating communities.
Yeah.
Then we assess, and unfortunately we don't have the funding to finance every proposal that is received. So it's always extremely difficult for us because the demand outweigh the supply.
Yeah.
So we do that, and then we also...
I think, Mr. Libanda, let me just interrupt you there. Just go for a short break,
Okay.
and we'll be back to continue this conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, to our viewers, we head for a quick break, and we'll be back to continue this interesting conversation. Stay tuned.
Sport Wrap is a daily show focusing on all sport news and current affairs. If you would like to feature your brand or campaign on this platform, contact sportwrap@synergy.com.ma.
Well, welcome back from the short break. Well, Mr. Libanda, just to continue our conversation and just on a rather different topic, but quite topical world over, is the issue of renewable versus non-renewable energy. And of course, as much as your institution is into green financing, it's something that also impacts your operation and way of doing things. Of course, our government has often mooted a mixed energy model as to what we should follow as a country. What have you picked up so far during your operations over the years? Where are we heading to as far as this phenomena is concerned?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think as a developing country, that requires a lot of investment to meet our development needs. On top of that, as a country that's not emitting carbon emission, but on contrary, we are a net carbon sink country, which means we absorb a lot of carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, than we emit.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the issue of debate, surrounding fossil fuel use and green energy, it shouldn't apply to Namibia. And that is supported by the UN Equity on Common but Differentiated Responsibilities. So which says countries that are emitting should lead, the way in terms of investing towards, greenhouse gases, reduction. And Namibia is not emitting. So what we should focus as a country is to use every resource that we have to develop the needs of the country, as well as ensure that we are resilient from the impacts of climate change. I think the argument here is that as developing countries, we need to be given long period to transition to green. It's not an overnight, because there's additionality to the costs. So that additionality, if it's not covered by a third party, so it becomes expensive for a country such as ours to realize our developmental goals. So, and as such, the strategy should to use our resources, but in a way that we transition over time to be a green country, maybe after 20 years or so, towards 50 years or so. Because already we are not emitting greenhouse gases, but actually we are absorbing those greenhouses. And someone who's emitting those greenhouses somewhere else needs to compensate us for cleaning the atmosphere. So this is where the discussion should align. That we've got forestry, our oceans, we've got different savannas that is sequestrating this carbon emission. Now, in our sequestrating capacity, someone is taking care, is a custodian of those forests. Are they being compensated to make sure that those forest areas are kept, and maintained to continue absorbing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse emissions? Not at all. So now the narrative should change. Like, how can we be adequately compensated as a country for cleaning up the atmosphere? Because we are not emitting.
Well, the narrative of holding, especially the superpowers who are mostly guilty of this, holding them to account, has been coming on for years now. But we don't see much change as far as this is concerned, and that's why this debate is still alive until today. So what do you think is, in the midterm, what is the most ideal way forward on this topic?
Yes, I think the most controversial area is the $100 billion that should be availed on an annual basis to developing countries by the developed countries. Of course, that hasn't been reached, but we have seen some efforts, especially from the multilateral climate funds, where the developed countries have capitalized the likes of the Green Climate Fund as well as the Adaptation Fund for us to access funding from. And that's where the climate change investments that I mentioned earlier on of about around 700 million that the EIF accessed, were from those windows that are provided by the developed countries. But we are also seeing that the developed countries are creating new platforms that allowed for incentivized schemes to be traded on, such as the European emission platform that facilitates carbon credits. And this is where now I was going for community forests. As a country now, we should now try to access and trade on such platforms so that our forest custodians starts to benefit. But again, you're right, because the investment required and the funds required by us as developing countries to adequately address climate change is not there. So now, if we are having fossil fuel resources, it's only meaningful that we use those resources in order to support our development, and also to speed up the transformation towards a low carbon economy. Because without utilizing those resources, it will be extremely difficult for us as a country to have a green economy because of lack of investment that is required for us to do so.
But what do you make of claims then from especially those high carbon emitters who claim that for as long as the developing world is pushing for a mixed energy generation model, it's like while you are on your journey to transitioning, you are still partly contributing to carbon emission. So why don't you then just significantly move towards the renewable zone?
Because yes, I think that's the idea. That would be the perfect way of doing it. But do we have the resources as a country to do that overnight? That's why I was saying the transition period of developing countries should not be the same as developed countries. Developed countries can do that overnight. Us, we need some years to build our infrastructure, to transition in a more sustained way. If such additionality in terms of cost can be covered by external capital, we can transition overnight. But unfortunately, we've learned over the past 10 years or 15 years or so that's not the case. Yeah. So imagine redirecting government budget, from other social and development needs to green economy. It will have a detrimental to our development, priorities.
Yeah.
So we need to have a balanced approach that is also enables us as a country to have a longer period of transition, especially developing countries, and developed countries to have shorter term frame of transition. So I think that would be a fair compromise, because after all, we are not emitting these greenhouse gases as a country.
Yeah.
We are more of a carbon sink country, and we need the resources to address unemployment, to address poverty, to address hunger, to improve access to water in rural areas, agriculture, self-sufficient, etc. So we still have a long way to go as a country.
Yeah. So whenever you attend these global meetings on this topic, what is the mood that you are getting from those settings? What is it that you are getting from there?
Actually, it is a process that we should participate actively, because it's got far-reaching consequences on us if we don't take part in them. Of course, the mood in those boardrooms is that the issue has gone beyond environment to more political as well as economic interest. So I think that is my take. Someone might be different, might have different opinions from mine. But from where I see it, it's more than climate change. It's more than conservation, environmental issues. But it's now integrating, economic interest, geopolitical issues, etc. But I think I can't go in details because that's not my area of specialization. I might be giving wrong information.
Just lastly, Mr. Libanda, of course, if I'm not mistaken, this is your last year as the head of the fund?
Yes or no? Because I think I don't want to go in details on that one, but I think it's my last term. But it's something that I haven't discussed yet with the board and with my principals. So I think I'm comfortable to discuss it further internally before I decide it externally. I know I just said yes or no, but I think I just want to take back what I said earlier on. Something that I would like to discuss internally and address it internally before I go out.
So just briefly, should you stay on? What are some of your medium-term goals?
I think what is of interest and the challenge to the fund now is our involvement in green hydrogen. So as EIF, we have been given the mandate to raise capital in support of the green hydrogen sector. So what we have done since last year, we've launched the SDG Namibia 1, which is a blended financing and fit for purpose investment platform that crowd in different types of capital from multilateral, philanthropic, private sectors, DFIs, etc. And the idea is to de-risk the investment that goes into green hydrogen because it's a new industry full of risks. So what we want to do is, what we're doing already is to start raising such funding. So far, we've raised about almost $1 billion in the last in the last 6 months, in partnership with the climate fund managers and Invest International. Of course, this was not ERF work alone. We worked with the Office of the President, specifically the Green Hydrogen Commissioner, who was extremely instrumental in attracting such funding, and line ministers. This is the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Environment and Tourism, and the National Planning Commissioner. So the DG, to be specific. So and now we want to scale up this fund and to introduce the Namibia Hydrogen Fund Managers, where we aim to raise about 1 billion euros by end of this year, together with our partners, the CFM and Invest International. And this will go towards a variety and value addition investments towards all the value chains of green hydrogen production and its derivatives. So and that is exciting. It's a cause for a lot of work and refocusing in terms of the ERF mandate.
Well, Mr. Libanda, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure having you on the set.
Thank you so much.
And all the best with your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, to our viewers, that's it from the Evening TV team review. Well, have a pleasant evening. See you again tomorrow, same time, same place.